Hi guys, it's Fred Catley here, and in today's video I'm going to explain how I'd fix any chronic injury as soon as possible without stopping training. So this is going to apply if you're an athlete or you're into your sport, maybe you're into CrossFit, Jiu-Jitsu, running, rugby, football, whatever it may be. And I'm going to take you through the exact 5-step system I use with athletes and clients to help them go from being incredibly frustrated, in a lot of pain, not being able to train, compete, or do their sport, back to being incredibly confident, having minimal to no pain, being stronger, being more mobile, and being more conditioned, and getting back to doing what they love. So the first thing we need to understand, the first kind of core truth, is this idea of diagnosis. So you might have seen a lot of things on YouTube, or you might have been to physios or coaches previously that hammer home how important diagnosis is. What I mean by diagnosis is, let's say for example you've got knee pain and you're going to see a physio and they believe that the diagnosis is important and that is the specific issue. So for example, is the issue at your kneecap, your patella? Is the issue at your meniscus? Is the issue at your quad? Is the issue at your hamstring? They place a huge amount of emphasis on diagnosis. Now, there is some nuance to this. So for example, if you've torn your ACL, your anterior cruciate ligament, it's going to be a slightly just longer process compared to if you just have a little bit of knee pain. But the problem is this puts you in completely the wrong mindset, because what essentially this allows you to do is kind of sidestep just having an overall framework for knee pain and almost hyperfixating on the specific diagnosis instead of being positive and moving forward with your knee rehab. Because if we look at any injury, we're trying to improve some core principles. We're trying to get you stronger. We're trying to get you more mobile. We're trying to get you more confident. We're trying to get you conditioned and ready for your sport. And we're trying to change your beliefs around pain so you can load that injured joint or tissue or area. And so this idea of diagnosis is quite damaging. And the other thing you'll do with diagnosis, as soon as you get one, you'll go on Google or Chat GPT and you'll look it up and it will give you the worst case scenario and it will give you some random exercises that don't really do very much. So it's why I'm not a big fan of it, to be honest, especially when it comes to chronic injuries, because it's not that important. And then the second core truth, is that you need a framework to follow. And what I mean by framework is a simple system where you test your mobility, your strength, your confidence, those things I talked about. You can then go through a phase of exercises to improve these things. You retest it, you get to a certain level, and then you progress on. Instead of doing those random stretches, those random mobility pieces you might have seen on YouTube that aren't getting you anywhere. You're not sticking to them and you're not measuring anything, and therefore you're not improving. So how do we go from pain to performance, so to speak? Well, what you need to understand is the journey you need to take to go from your current self to the goal. And what you're struggling with is the vehicle. So how we get from your current self to the goal. And the vehicle is this 5-step framework. Now, what does this look like in reality? So the first piece of the framework, or first step, is protect and prep. So this is the first phase. And essentially what we're looking to do here is reduce your pain quite significantly and improve your mobility and movement around the affected and injured joint. And the reason we want to do this is because if we can't reduce your pain significantly, then we're not going to be able to load that joint because your brain is protecting it, it doesn't want to load it. And so usually in phase 1, it's very gentle breathing and mobility exercises. It's a lot of learning to relax and lose tension around the injured area, and it's a lot of very boring and repetitive stuff. Now, the specific exercises here massively depend on the injury, but that is the general gist of phase one. And before you do phase one, essentially what we will be measuring, or what you should be measuring, is your whiteboard marker running out, your pain, your mobility, your strength, and your confidence, very broadly. And so we're measuring all of these things before we go into phase one, seeing where you're weak, how much pain are you getting. If we think of a scale of 0 to 10, 10 is the worst pain imaginable, 0 is no pain. How much pain are we getting on that scale? How mobile are you at the specific joint, but also in the rest of your body? How strong are you, again, at the injured joint, but also in the rest of your body? And how confident are you on a scale of 0 to 10 again? And then also alongside confidence is consistency. So how consistent are you with rehab? And then how consistently are you managing to do rehab sessions or exercising with minimal to no pain? So that gives us a really nice framework then to work off. Once you go through phase one, we retest, and then you can go into phase two. Now, phase two is what I call build a base. So phase two has a much bigger emphasis on starting to build some strength in those new ranges that you've found from phase one. And because your pain is now down to a level that's manageable, we can start to build some strength. So phase two will simply introduce some more strength work alongside that mobility. In terms of frequency per week throughout all these phases, usually what I give to people is at least 3 big sessions a week. I'm just going to grab another pen. I do apologise because these ones are being very, very shit. Let's try that. 3 That's better. 3 times 60-minute sessions a week, minimum. And this would be a mix of mobility and strength for phase one and phase two. So usually at least that 3 60-minute sessions a week, could be more depending on the level of the athlete. And then alongside that, you'd be doing some form of daily mobility, which would be 5 minutes of 2 or 3 structured exercises. That simple, really. So again, phase two, we'd measure those same things that we were measuring in phase one, just to a high level. So again, you'd retest your pain, mobility, strength, confidence. Are these at the correct levels? Then you progress to phase three. Phase three is what I'd call strength and power. So you're still doing a lot of the strength work from phase two, but in this phase you start to introduce more power-based work, which is just a fancy way of saying a bit more speed introduced. So starting to train some speed qualities. So we're introducing things like potentially some double leg pogos, so hopping around on the spot, some bounds, laterally, changing of direction, lots of things like that. Maybe dropping off some boxes and jumping, getting your body used to absorbing force and teaching it to absorb force and use that effectively. Again, similar setup there, minimum 3 60-minute sessions. But again, now within the session, it would probably be mobility. God, again, I need to get some new pens. That's better. Mobility, then it would be power stuff, and then it would be strength. And this would usually be split into lower and upper body by this stage. So if you're doing 3 sessions a week, more than likely it would be 1 lower body, 1 upper body, and then 1 full body session. Or if it was 4 sessions a week, it could be 2 upper body and 2 lower body. And then also alongside this, continuing to do 5 minutes of daily mobility. Then you'd move into phase 4. And phase 4 is what I call dynamic control. Dynamic control. All this means is more emphasis on power and speed. So again, if we break down what these sorts of sessions would look like, again, it would start with a little bit of mobility. Then the majority of the session would be power/speed. And then you'd finish off with 15-20 minutes maybe of strength work. So with the power and speed element, this would be more and more specific to your sport in phase 4. I'll give you some good examples. So if you're looking to get back to CrossFit, you might start to be doing more workouts that are specific to CrossFit. So doing CrossFit specific movements like power clean, snatches, wall balls, being on the assault bike, whatever it may be, in those sorts of time domains at a higher intensity. If you're looking to get back to football, for example, then you might start to use the football on the pitch. You might start to do some passing drills with a football, change direction. You wouldn't be working with anyone yet, but you'd start to get used to playing that sport again at a lower intensity and volume. So you move through phase 4. Again, you would test all those things we talked about: pain, mobility, strength. You'd also now test speed qualities, speed and confidence. And then you move into phase 5. Phase 5 is sport ready. Sport ready. So this phase has a massive emphasis on those specific activities in your sport that you need to get ready for. So if we break down a week for, let's take a footballer because it's an easy example. Let's break down a week. So within the week now, they'd more than likely do 2 strength sessions. And what I mean by a strength session is what I talked about previously. It is, I call it strength session, but again, it's that 5 minutes of mobility, then a bit of speed and power, then a bit of strength. So let's call them gym sessions instead. That makes more sense. 2 gym sessions. Then it might be 2 on-pitch sessions, so football related. And then it might be 1 training/match. So this would be a gradual introduction with other players at training at a lower intensity and volume. And then once they're comfortable with that, a gradual reintroduction to matches at a lower intensity and volume. So initially they might just come off the bench and play for 5-10 minutes. And then they would gradually do more and more minutes and build up to starting. And obviously what we're looking to achieve is a 90-minute football match with minimal to no pain, obviously meeting all the other criteria in terms of pain, mobility, confidence, speed, etc., etc. And then they finish rehab. So it's a pretty simple framework. Some important things to consider here, and some other things that you might not have thought of that are going to help you progress through all those phases, is these 3 things, these 3 elephants in the room. Using a lot of different colours in this video. Sleep, nutrition, and then we'll also talk about pain in a bit more depth. So these are things that can accelerate you more quickly through the process, or they can sabotage the process and make it more slow, or these might have been things that actually caused your injury in the first place. The first thing is sleep. Now, a lot of you who train a lot aren't actually sleeping enough. If you're training 4 to 6 times a week, you need to be sleeping minimum 8.5, 9 hours a night of good quality sleep. Sleep, as we know, is incredibly important for muscle recovery, for brain health, for just everything that happens in the body. And a big part of rehab that's kind of neglected and underrated is retraining your brain to load particular movements, especially on that injured joint or injured side, let's say, within the body. And so, sleep is really important for that. So everyone should be doing that. The next thing is nutrition. So the big thing here that people tend to neglect or miss out is eating enough protein. So I would aim for 2 grams per kilo of body weight daily. So if I'm 80 kilos around that moment, I would need 160 grams of protein a day, and that would be ideally be split into 4 to 5 servings. So for me, I probably just do 4 servings of 40 grams of protein in each meal or snack. And then the other thing with nutrition is a lack of carbs, a lack of fueling pre-training sessions. So if you're doing rehab and then you're doing, let's say, additional conditioning that you can manage throughout the rehab process, and you're doing, let's say a double day, a double session, you need to be fueling with at least, I would say, this is going to vary, but 50 to 60 grams of carbs an hour before session. Not necessarily after all the time, but definitely before. And usually not too complex, so nothing that's going to be like incredibly starchy, just something that you can easily digest. So something like crumpets, bagels, basically white carbs. A lot of people call this like shit food, but it's important for performance and getting some fuel in. And then the final thing is pain. So what a lot of people don't really understand about pain is they might be going through the rehab process and they might be seeing that the pain isn't decreasing that much. And this is very, very normal, because what's happening while this isn't decreasing is all those other things we talked about. So your mobility, strength, confidence, conditioning, all of that is improving like fairly rapidly. But then pain is kind of, you'll see it come up and then it'll do this. It'll do dips and troughs, but it will gradually be getting less and less. Like you'll gradually be improving, let's say, in terms of a pain score metric. So at the start of rehab, maybe your pain is like a 5 or 6 out of 10. If 10 is the worst pain, 0 is no pain. And by the end, it might be 0, but successful rehab you might still have a bit of pain. It might still be 1 or 2 out of 10, but you're back to that sport activity. So what I'm trying to say is pain is an important metric to measure, but it's not everything. Don't hyper obsess over it. Don't like really think when it springs up throughout the day, oh, that was a particular movement that caused it. Don't hyper analyze it. It's incredibly complex and it's influenced by so many factors. The ones I mentioned previously, your sleep, your nutrition, but also your relationships, your stress levels at work throughout your week, which can also be they're up and down massively. Your beliefs around pain. So another common misbelief that people have around pain is that more pain equals more damage. So if you're experiencing more pain at a particular injured joint or injured area, you think that's causing more damage, and that just isn't the case. The best example of this is the studies they've done of MRI scans with lower back pain. So they took 2 groups of people, A and B, and people in group A didn't have any lower back pain. So let's just mark that with an X. And then the people in group B reported lower back pain, and they both went in to have MRI scans. So A goes in first. Remember, they haven't reported any back pain before they go in to get the scan. They go in to get the scan, and on some of the scans there is a lot of damage at their lower back, but they haven't reported any pain. Then group B goes in. Remember, all of these people have reported lower back pain before going in. They go in to get their scans, and on the scans, some of them, there's no damage, but they're reporting pain. So this shows you it's inconsistent. There's not a clear pattern. And this is because, as I previously mentioned, pain is incredibly complex, and it's not simply just down to physical tissue damage or joint damage, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, there's some other things that can sabotage your progress. Another thing I want to talk about, which we're going to see that, yeah, perfect, is dopamine. Well, now this isn't some like self-improvement video, but this is actually like really prevalent and really important in the world we live in now. And this massively applies to rehab and why a lot of people don't succeed. Because essentially, when you're going on Instagram, you're going on YouTube, and you're trying to find 60-second to 90-second videos to magically fix your chronic injury, you're looking for that short-term dopamine boost, and you're looking for that quick fix, which doesn't exist, and you're training your brain to look for that. Whereas realistically, most athletes and clients I work with chronic pain, it takes minimum 12 up to 24 weeks to see significant improvements in pain, mobility, strength, confidence. If you think about it, if you've been dealing with chronic pain, and I'd probably describe chronic as anything past 3 to 4 months in terms of back pain, shoulder pain, knee pain, foot and ankle pain, whatever it is, then it's not going to be fixed in one session. If you go in to see a physio and they're promising to fix you in one session, or you're going to see a massage therapist and they're promising to fix you in one session, they're lying to you. And I'm being honest with you and saying it's going to take minimum 12 up to 24 weeks for most people. And it could be slightly shorter than that, or it could be slightly longer, but that's the ballpark figure. Because it takes time to retrain your brain and body to improve all the markers that we talked about. Pain, mobility, strength, speed, confidence. And as well as that, it also takes time for your brain to understand that more pain doesn't equal more damage. It takes more time for you to maybe get better habits in terms of your sleep schedule, in terms of improving your nutrition. These are all lifestyle things, and they're not instant fixes, because you have to become a different version of yourself to actually be successful with rehab, because it's an incredibly boring and arduous process, and it's just not as instantly fulfilling as training. If you think about it, I'll use jiu-jitsu as an example, because I started that about 4 months ago. With jiu-jitsu, you get this pretty much instant rush of dopamine as soon as you go into a class or a training session with someone. It's instantly fun. Same thing if you're playing football, if you're playing rugby, into a training session, into a match. But when you're doing rehab, you don't get that. You have to stick at rehab for, a few weeks before you get that, maybe that little dopamine spike. And this is why a lot of people simply can't stick with it. They don't understand the fact that they need to retrain their brain to have delayed gratification with rehab. And this is being compromised, and it's being decreased because, we're all addicted to short form content, and we're all addicted to getting dopamine in 20 to 30 second reels or quick fixes. So it's not helpful. So that's another thing to mention there, but I feel like that it's very important with a lot of people, and it's something a lot of people have to change. So in summary again, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, phase 4, phase 5. You jump between each of these, meeting the criteria between each of them, as you start to improve your lifestyle factors as well. And then at the end, you've reached your end goal. You're back to that sport or activity. So you've gone from your current self to that goal. You become a different version of yourself, and the vehicle you've used to get there is that framework, alongside changing your beliefs and your mindset around fixing chronic pain. So I hope that was helpful. I hope that gave you some insight into how I help athletes, and it gives you actually an effective tool to do that, which isn't some magical exercise or quick fix. If you are interested in working with me, just check out the top link down below. I help athletes implement that framework for their specific injury. If not, just keep watching my videos. I'll explain most of it to you for free anyways. Take care. I'll see you in the next one.